Hey everybody, what's going on? The Montreal Canadiens 2023-2024 campaign came to an end this week, and there's plenty to dive into in today's season review video. But before we do that, if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button to this channel. It's as easy as clicking in the bottom right-hand corner of this video. The Montreal Canadiens season came to an end, and it'll give them the fifth best lottery odds heading into the NHL's draft lottery for the top pick in this year's NHL entry draft, which by all accounts will be Macklin Celebrini, who is a tremendous talent and is someone that can really change the trajectory of a program. If the Montreal Canadiens were to land this type of talent in the draft, they would assuredly be on to the next stage of the rebuild. But since we can't deal with the absolutes of that just yet, we have to talk about what happened during the season, the pros, the cons, and just everything in between. Let's start with what went well for the Montreal Canadiens this season. You have to talk about the player development of this team. Juraj Slafkovsky took his game to a completely different level and started bringing optimism to the Montreal Canadiens fan base that they might finally have a star player that they developed and drafted in the organization. Sure, there have been players like Alex Galchenyuk and Jesperi Kotkaniemi in the past who showed flashes, but the consistency that Slafkovsky brought to the table from December 15th on is just noteworthy for the progression of this team in the future. He has the potential to be a franchise-changing winger. I'm not sure what to cap him at in terms of the potential that he can bring to the table in terms of his points, but he seems like the type of player you're going to want on your team when they eventually make the jump to being a playoff team down the line. I'm not so certain that'll be next season, but they should at least be able to be in the conversation for a playoff spot, especially if they're able to add more offensive touch in the offseason. But you have to also factor in the development of Nick Suzuki as the Montreal Canadiens' number one center. There were definite question marks about whether or not Suzuki had the ability to be a number one center in the NHL, and I think he put those to rest this season with how dominant he was. Along with his point totals, he showed consistency at both ends of the ice. His ability on the power play as well was also noteworthy. There's just a lot to like in terms of how Suzuki is developing as not only a player but a leader and the captain of this organization. The Montreal Canadiens have to be thrilled with what they have in Suzuki, especially when you factor in that he is a very reasonable cap hit moving forward as well. And then you move along to Cole Caulfield on that top line. Caulfield might not have had the goal totals that he would have liked, but we talked about this going into the season. We weren't expecting a big output from him after having shoulder surgery. It can take 1 to 2 seasons to get back to feeling your complete self after having that type of surgery on the ice. And we know the importance of that 1/10 of a second can be for a goal scorer like Caulfield. So I think he's going to continue to add more goals in his career moving forward over the next 2 seasons. You can start to expect him to get back to that 40 goal potential over the next few years. And I think that's very reasonable. But what you have to like about Caulfield right now is how he developed into a complete player throughout this season. He's really buying into what Martin St. Louis is selling in the Montreal Canadiens organization as their head coach, who was also extended for 2 more seasons after next year. So he'll be around for at least the next 3 seasons, which is a very positive development, not only for players like Caulfield, Suzuki, and Slafkovsky, but the rest of the organization. Caulfield just really did so many things this season that make you think he can be a really problematic top line winger in the NHL, and that's very positive news for the Montreal Canadiens. But like I just said about St. Louis, you have to like that he's here for the long haul with this team. You can kind of see the hints from the organization that he's going to be a big player in pitching free agents to come to Montreal. And that has to be a positive development for this team who hasn't been able to really lure the big fish in the past. But I think having a head coach like St. Louis really bolsters the probability of that eventually occurring for the Montreal Canadiens, whether it's this summer or next. The opportunity is going to be potentially there for the Montreal Canadiens to add free agent scoring to this lineup, and that's a very positive development for the future of this team. And then you factor in the defense as well. It's going to be a logjam next season, and there were pros and cons to how some of these players played this season, but you have to be excited about what players like Logan Mailloux and Lane Hutchins showed toward the end of the year, especially Hudson. There were some concerns about how he would fit into the NHL with his size and frame, and if he would be able to pull off the same things he did in college at the NHL level. And to no one's surprise, during his first 2 NHL games, you immediately saw those same things he was doing in college transitioning into the NHL, and it's still working. So I think that says a lot about his projectability as a player. This is a world-class talent and someone that's going to be a potential face of the Montreal Canadiens moving forward. And you have to like how Hudson showed that little small sample in those 2 games, what he could potentially be for this future. And you notice at the Bell Center during the last game of the regular season, the crowd is already taking to him, and they haven't been getting on their feet for a defenseman like that since PK Subban. So I think there's a lot to like about how he's going to develop in a Montreal Canadiens uniform. This is a big summer for him. He's going to put on some weight. He potentially isn't done growing as well either. So I think that's really positive when it comes to how this team is going to build their blue line moving forward. And I don't envy the management staff for deciding how this is going to play out because there's so many bodies. And of course, they don't have to trade everyone in the offseason because there's still time to develop in Laval and they don't have to make any rash decisions. But there's a lot to go this season. And I think one of the defensemen, it won't be a surprise to see them moved in the offseason for a scoring forward. That's it for me today from Cook's Corner. As always, let me know in the comment section down below what you thought of the Montreal Canadiens 2023-24 campaign. And stay tuned on this channel for plenty of draft coverage along with free agency talk as well as the Montreal Canadiens transition into the offseason. I'm Zach Cook. We'll see you later.